I wanted to see if I could level up my Japanese ability, specifically my reading and vocabulary, using only the Nintendo 3DS. I also wanted to be able to play the computer game Dragon Quest X more smoothly and with less lookups. Finally, I wanted to get back at least a portion of my Japanese writing ability. I also wanted to get a perfect score on the JLPT M1, but that's a longer-term goal. With those goals in mind, I devised an extremely complicated test that would push the boundaries of my knowledge. I read a book for 30 minutes, and I tracked how many page turns and lookups I had. Then I played Dragon Quest X for 1 hour and tracked my progress and lookups on that too. These need to get better. If I was going to become a Nihongo master using only the Nintendo 3DS, I needed the best games. I didn't want any hiragana only games. Reading things in just hiragana is a royal pain. Ideally, I wanted games with furigana, which is kanji that has how you read it above or below the kanji itself. While I don't mind games that just use kanji, furigana makes life for learners easier. At least, that's what I thought. I actually changed my mind about this later on in the project, which I'll explain later. I also wanted games with a lot of dialogue. Fighting games, racing games, and stuff like that probably wouldn't get me far, but dialogue-heavy RPGs are perfect. When I started, I didn't realize what a wide variety of visual novels the 3DS has, but these are excellent for studying as well. Cheap! Used games are pretty affordable in Japan, and I got most of the games I bought for less than $10, often less than $5. The Higurashi no Naku Koro games were between $3 and $15. Dragon Quest VIII was a little more expensive, but at least it's a long game. Finally, I tried to find games that had voice acting so that I could get listening practice while gaming too. For tracking my progress, I decided to use Japanese, a Japanese to English dictionary, to track how many words I looked up for each game. I chose this app for the sole reason that it has an amazing list feature. Every time I look up a word, I can quickly add it to a list I created for that game, and I can go through them later to see how many I remembered at the end of each week. I prefer to use a Japanese to Japanese dictionary for a project like this because more Japanese equals better, and I'm pretty decent at it already, but none of them had such a useful list feature. Later on, I did switch over to a J to J dictionary, but that's later in the story. Morning started with Tobidase Doubutsu no Mori, or Animal Crossing, for 20 to 30 minutes, just to wake up. I had quite a few lookups in the beginning of the game, but things chilled out quickly, and it was a nice little way to immerse while waking up. A huge bonus for Animal Crossing is that there's furigana, and most of the vocabulary is very useful for day-to-day life. After breakfast, it was time for Kanken Training 2. Kanken is the test Japanese kids and adults take to certify their kanji level. I quickly finished level 10, the lowest level before starting this project, but from week 1 I started doing about 45 minutes to 1 hour per morning. I enjoyed this game more than I expected. It probably helped that I was more so remembering how to write things I used to be able to write. I already finished Remembering the Kanji by James Hasig like 10 years ago and used to write a lot at my old job, but I forgot how to write just about everything after a year or two away from Japan. This might not be a big deal for a lot of people, but living in Japan, you actually need to write quite a bit in day-to-day life. Forms, man. So many forms. So yeah, I want this skill back. I chose Kanken Training 2 instead of 1 because it has more exercises than 1 and it's the most up to date. It's still using data from the 2014 version of the Kanken tests, but it's not like I'm gonna actually take the test. For the rest of the day, I usually focus on Dragon Quest VIII and more Animal Crossing. Dragon Quest VIII is awesome because it has a ton of dialogue and all the cutscenes are fully voice acted. They're good voice actors too. For example, the voice actor for the antagonist is this guy. And this guy. And this guy.
なあ、リヴァイ兵長。ガビとファルコにもこの雄大な自然を見せてやりたいんだが。
I picked Dragon Quest games to play because I figured I could learn a bunch of common words from Dragon Quest while also having the furigana to make lookups easier. This would give me a huge head start in Dragon Quest X when I finally get back into it. I also played a tiny bit of Zelda Ocarina of Time this week, but there really wasn't a lot of difficult dialogue. I think this might be perfect for a beginner though. Later in the week, I picked up Gyakuten Saiban on the e-store and started to realize that visual novels like this might be even better than other games for reading practice. The only problem is that this game and most other VNs do not have furigana. There was lots of repeated vocabulary though, so it made it quite easy to remember what I learned. Fortunately, I also was using an iPad and Apple Pencil, which allowed me to just draw kanji I wanted to look up easily. My favorite Japanese to Japanese dictionary also allows you to search for kanji just writing them in on iOS, and you can use the writing keyboard on Android for lookups if you need to. Here's how many words I looked up in each game during week 1, as well as how long I played them for. And here's how many I learned. To figure this out, I went through the entire list of words I looked up, and if I remembered the meaning of the word, I counted it as learned for now. Later weeks, some of these words I forgot, and many I still remembered. This was actually a much better start than I envisioned. With that said, it was much harder to play 8 hours per day of 3DS than I expected, because I needed to do some regular work every day as well. And I also needed to eat, sleep, and shower. The reality was more like 6 to 7 hours. I decided I'd be happy with about 40 hours per week after actually giving this a shot on week 1. How many hours per week do you think you could dedicate to a project like this? Let me know in the comments. Week 2, I started noticing more and more that visual novels were going to be the fastest way to improve. If this was just for fun, I might have continued just playing Dragon Quest and Animal Crossing, but this was supposed to be a challenge. So I wanted to really push myself. I started playing the visual novel Higurashi no Nakukoro, a horror game, although I never really reached the horror parts. My god, was that difficult. I felt like I was a complete beginner at Japanese again. These games are aimed at high schoolers and adults, and they use a lot of hard kanji even for that age group from what I've heard at least. So this was a massive challenge. I also discovered some super cheap visual novels on the eStore, which by the way is only around for a few more months, so grab them if you can. You can get cards to charge your balance on the eStore and Amazon still, which may be the only possible way for those of you living outside of Japan to charge your eStore account, and maybe the only way for those of you living here too. Affiliate link in the description. So those cheap visual novels were basically just reading material with pictures. There's no choices or anything and no gameplay aspects, but just having the pictures and music is enough that it's better than books for some people. With that said, the kanji is very small, so it can be a little difficult to see the radicals you need when looking up kanji. This week, Animal Crossing felt less and less challenging with too much time just collecting stuff, so for regular games, I spent around 10 hours in Dragon Quest. The further I got in Dragon Quest though, the more grinding became necessary. Now, Dragon Quest fight text moves super fast, so I made it a point to try reading every word of it as it went by. This definitely helped my speed a bit, but it was extremely repetitive, and with only 2 weeks to go, I felt like my time might be better spent elsewhere. Here's my numbers for week 2. In week 3, I practically abandoned Dragon Quest and Animal Crossing and threw myself into Shukaku no 12 Gatsu and Higurashi no Nakukoro. It was during this week that I realized I could use save games and story trees to jump back in stories and reread things I already read. While one segment might take an hour to go through the first time, the second time might only take 50 minutes or less because I already knew how to read the words, or could just use my dictionary list as I went along for words I still struggled with. These were already in the order I had looked them up, so this made for a speedy reread. One word of warning. If you ever play Higurashi, when you go directly to a point in the timeline, it runs the story as if you took a default path, so my story became a mess before I realized that. I ended up starting over completely and utilizing the massive amount of save spaces to jump back and forth in sections instead of using the timeline. By the way, if I were to do this type of studying long term, I might not recommend just visual novels for lower level learners. It can be exhausting, and I was starting to feel it by the end of this week. If I were you, I might mix up my games like half and half. Half regular games like Dragon Quest and Monster Hunter Stories, which I also had fun starting this week, and the other half visual novels or something. Shin Megami Tensei, by the way, which I started this week as well, seemed like a great game with lots of reading at first, but when you enter hell and start fighting demons, the difficulty of the gameplay made me wonder if this is really a great option for studying long term. I quit when I realized I'd be spending more time messing with save games than reading, but a lot of people will probably still enjoy it. Numbers for week 3. After 3 weeks of managing over 40 hours of games per week, I now had to return to the USA for a loss in my family. The beauty of the Nintendo 3DS is that it's super compact and easy to pop open anywhere and start playing. Sadly, due to all the travel and jet lag upon arrival, I couldn't manage 40 hours this week, but 25 was still better than 0. I also discovered a free visual novel in the eStore called True Remembrance that really sucked me in. All in all, after 4 weeks, I reached a total playtime of about 154 hours. I really like doing this, and if you like this video so far, smash the like button. It really helps. The difficulty with immersion is that it can be hard to notice your progress. You're with yourself every day, so without some way to measure your progress, it can seem extremely slow. That's how I felt after 4 weeks, but I was wrong. Here are the results from the day 1 read a book test. Here are the results at the end of week 4 with the same book. Double the speed, same amount of lookups. But because I read double the amount, it actually means that I nearly halved my lookups. This is a massive win in my book. I was so thrilled, I decided to keep going while I was away in the States. I only managed about 20 hours the first bonus week, but since I no longer needed to track words learned, I switched to a Japanese to Japanese dictionary, which really upped the ante. I finished True Remembrance this week. I really enjoyed this game and think it's kind of criminal that it's free on PC and DS. The music and story were on point. Check it out for sure. In the second week of month 2, I discovered the joy of Rune Factory 4. I thought I would only end up playing about 20 hours this week as well, but on the first day of Rune Factory, I played it for 7 hours. Talk about addicting. There is no furigana, but for me, the level seemed to be perfect. I still had to do a decent amount of lookups, but it wasn't jarring or anything. I'd say that I probably would have learned more if I continued with Higurashi or another VN, but I enjoyed this one so much that I was able to focus for a lot longer, so perhaps it evens out in the end. This is also the point at which I realized that I kind of prefer not having furigana. If kanji show up more than once, it gives you a chance to challenge yourself to actually read them. In games, a lot of words do show up more than once, and since these days you can just draw the kanji into a dictionary, not having furigana didn't really slow me down much. Of course, furigana makes things faster, but I kind of like not having it while playing this game, and games like Gyakuten Saiban. Because I was away from my computer in Japan while I was in America, I had to retest Dragon Quest X when I got back to Japan. While visiting family in New Jersey for my last 11 days in the USA, I was able to play exactly 0 hours of 3DS, and I got COVID immediately upon returning to Japan, so there went another 10 days. So that might have affected my Dragon Quest X results negatively, but here they are. Only 18 lookups in 1 hour compared to the previous 35. That's almost halved from before. And I got significantly further in the story this time. Not to mention 11 fights versus day one's 2 fights, and reaching level 5 instead of level 2. Another huge win on this front. As you can see, the results speak for themselves. Nintendo 3DS is a totally viable way to immerse in Japanese. If you're not quite ready for this level of immersion though, or you're a total beginner, our course on tokenyandy.com might be exactly what you need. We take you through all the grammar necessary to get started on something like this 3DS project, with exercises, shadowing practice, and lots of original reading and listening material to help make it all stick, all while introducing you to new vocabulary in context. Get 50% off your first month with coupon code Nintendo3DS and join the community of over 1,200 Japanese learners today. Out of all the games I bought, there are only 3 that I would not recommend at all. The first was Bungaku Zenshu. It's basically just a bunch of books you can read, but it's worse in your eyes than Kindle, and you can't actually look up anything in the game itself, like you could on a Kindle or in a web browser. I also saw Bunsho Yomi Toreiningu recommended on Twitter and gave that a shot, but my god was it boring. Finally, I tried the visual novel World End Economica 1 on 3DS. The game seems good, but I'd recommend it on a different platform, as it's really hard to see the kanji on such a small screen for this game. Every other game I picked up, I could definitely recommend. Here's a list in order of difficulty. I also list whether they have furigana or voice acting. You can find links for all of them down in the description and can order them used even outside of Japan from some sellers. One quick, very important note is that you can only play Japanese 3DS games on a Japanese 3DS. You can order used ones very cheaply on the Japanese Amazon and get them shipped anywhere in the world. There's an affiliate link in the description if you'd like your purchase to help out this channel. Doesn't cost anything extra. What's your favorite 3DS game?